Hi, everyone. Good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us for Qube's webinar. We're excited to share how Qube's EPA-approved continuous monitoring technology can help operators meet compliance as well as operational efficiencies. With that, I'd like to introduce Andrew Walsh, our VP of Customer Success, as well as Gretchen Kern, our VP of Regulatory and External Affairs, who are going to be leading this discussion. With that, I'll let you guys take it away. Thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank you again for joining us. I'm Gretchen Kern, and I've been with Qube, gosh, it'll be about 9 months, and I'm really excited to share a little bit about our EPA approval as well as implementation of Qube's approval. So I'll get started. First, I will discuss the basics of leak detection and repair programs and how they contribute to corporate goals. LDAR programs are an essential component to oil and gas operations as they greatly minimize the release of harmful pollutants such as volatile organic compounds and greenhouse gases. Today, in addition to compliance, they are a driving force in achieving corporate emission reduction goals and meeting voluntary framework commitments. Both federal and state regulatory requirements are constantly in flux and may have different technology requirements. It's prudent to have a durable yet flexible LDAR program in place to withstand pendulum swinging with each new administration. Even if this administration loosens methane regulations, LDAR programs are key to corporate risk mitigation. Third parties are still performing aerial satellite inspections of industrial facilities, and the super emitter program under Qube OOOOb is still in place. Public reporting of this data may negatively impact corporate reputation and increase reportable emissions. And last, robust LDAR programs can keep more saleable product in the pipe and provide useful data to confirm reported methane intensity. Next slide. There are several challenges with existing LDAR programs. Emissions vary temporally, so intermittent leaks may be missed by quarterly optical gas imaging inspections or other periodic screening methods. Increasing OGI inspections require more manpower and more vehicles, which will increase hydrocarbon emissions through the tailpipe, as well as more cameras to perform the work, or an additional cost to hire a third party to conduct these routine inspections. And last, there's no clear alignment between LDAR workflows and corporate emission reduction goals. For example, a company may have a corporate goal to reduce methane emissions intensity 75% by 2030. Quarterly LDAR does not align with a corporate program to measure emissions to determine a reduction in emissions intensity. Now operators have more technology options and can rethink their LDAR program. They can leverage technology they choose or a combination of technologies and design an LDAR program for their sites, one that is more tailored to their goals. Qube's technology can improve efficiency by detecting emissions continuously on its own in real time and alerting the operator through our state-of-the-art dashboard without requiring personnel to monitor the site in person. Continuous monitoring can catch more leaks, and an operator can therefore reduce more emissions overall, as well as prioritize leaks so they can fix the bigger leakers faster. And last, by designing their own program, an operator can align corporate, voluntary, and regulatory commitments through program management. Now I will provide an overview of the EPA's New Source Performance Qube OOOOb rule. EPA's Qube OOOOb supplemental rule was effective May 7th of last year. It is still in place. It regulates methane as well as volatile organic compounds and applies to all new, modified, and reconstructed upstream and midstream oil and gas facilities after December 6th of 2022. And that's upstream as well as midstream. EPA allows operators to use approved advanced monitoring technology or a combination of technologies to identify leaks at well sites, centralized production sites, and compressor stations. And in the rule, EPA has determined equivalencies to quarterly OGI, and Qube has received EPA approval as an equivalent alternative technology, which means that operators could use Qube's technology in lieu of the quarterly OGI program to comply with Quad OB as well as Quad OC. And in the interim, until Quad OC is finalized, operators may use approved technologies to comply with Quad OA's semi-annual LDAR monitoring as well. And Qube is continuing to work closely with industry trade groups and engaging in policy discussions with EPA in Washington, D.C., as well as the technical staff in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, members of Congress, and the White House Office of Management and Budget to ensure that alternative technology is encouraged and equivalency approvals remain in the rules under this administration. Next slide. Now I'll discuss the emission guidelines Quad OC. On March 8th of last year, EPA finalized the Quad OC emission guidelines, and these were in the same rule package as Quad OB and have basically the same requirements as Quad OB as well. The difference is Quad OC regulates methane only, not VOCs, and is applicable to all existing sources constructed before that same December date, so before December 6th of 2022. States must draft a plan at least as stringent as these federal emission guidelines, and EPA will have oversight authority in implementation and enforcement. EPA can approve the state plan or reject it and draft a federal implementation plan for that state. And so these plans are in the works by the states. Even though this administration may make some changes, the states are on track to implement their plan. Qube is continuing to work closely with industry trade groups again and engaging in policy discussions with the EPA as well as the states to ensure that alternative technology equivalency approvals, like Qube's approval, are streamlined in the state plans. And this is a timeline of the state plans. This is subject to change, but as of now, the state plans are due to EPA of March of 2026, and the compliance deadline for the states to comply is March of 2029. Next slide. This is just a snapshot of the applicability dates, and you'll see Quad OB is applicable to all notified or reconstructed sources after that December 6, 2022 date. Quad OC are all existing sources before that date, and Quad OA overlaps with Quad OC, and that's because Quad OA is still in effect, but once Quad OC is in effect, it will replace Quad OA, and Quad OA will go away. And like I said, Qube has been approved for operators to use our technology to comply with Quad OB as well as Quad OA, and then Quad OC once that goes into effect. Next slide. So as I mentioned, Qube has been approved as an alternative test method for periodic screening work practices, and it is a substitute for OGI-based inspections. EPA has already made that equivalency determination and accepted Qube to be used. And the thresholds, the sensitivity thresholds that Qube was approved for is 5 kilograms an hour, 10 kilograms an hour, and 15 kilograms an hour, and the operator can choose which threshold they would want to comply with. And the EPA rule site applicability, as I mentioned, is for Quad OB, Quad OC in the future, and Quad OA for now as well. And that website link is to all of the approvals, and so you'll see Qube's approval letter, and you'll get to see the work practices that have been approved. Now that I have set the stage, I will turn it over to Andrew to walk through the implementation of Qube's technology work practice. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you, Gretchen. So Gretchen's done a great job setting the stage on why companies should be looking at new and innovative LDAR programs along with some of the regulatory timelines for compliance. Now we're going to switch into some more of the technical details in how Qube's technology actually works in relation to these work practices. So in the EPA's final rule for Quad OB and Quad OC, they define a metric called 90% probability of detection for technologies that fall into 1, 2, 5, 10, or 15 kilogram thresholds. Qube has chosen to apply and has been approved for the 5, 10, and 15 kilogram thresholds. And what you see on the left here is actually some performance metrics from Qube. Our probability of detection of the technology is actually 1.5 kilograms at 75 meters. The reason that we applied for 5, 10, and 15 is from a careful data review of some of the sites to which Qube monitoring has been deployed. So this data here is an example of some data over 12 months from 34 sites. And what we know from looking at continuous monitoring data collected at many sites across the oil and gas industry is that most sites have a pretty consistent baseline emission rate. And so what we're showing here on the x-axis is all of these detected rates placed into bins, whether a rate is less than 1 kilogram, less than 2, less than 5, less than 10, and so on. And on the y-axis, you see the cumulative percentage of emissions that are in these various buckets. And what we find is that most sites have a low-level background emission rate. And so by selecting a higher 90% probability of detection threshold, operators are going to be able to focus on emissions that are significant and not have to do OGI follow-ups at sites that are just kind of reporting at their normal background emission rate. So what does this mean? Operators now have two paths for compliance. As Gretchen pointed out, it's really one or the other. These are deemed equivalent. So companies can choose to continue with what's called the best system of emission reduction. That's quarterly leak detection and repair under Quad OB and the future Quad OC, which requires an OGI or Method 21 inspection once per quarter. Or alternatively, they can apply a periodic screening work practice using an improved technology like Qube, where rather than having to go to site and perform the inspection, the technology is used to screen the site, and only if required is an OGI follow-up required. The EPA did a lot of work to determine equivalency between these two programs, and it is really one or the other, regardless of the technical characteristics that you might observe. So what does this look like with Qube specifically? With Qube, a periodic screen is defined as a 7-day average emission rate during the month of the required screening. And the operator has a lot of flexibility here to determine when that screening period starts. It can be any day in the month. And continuous monitoring data outside of the screening period is not considered for LDAR compliance, but is useful for identifying and mitigating other notable events. So what does this look like using two simple examples? In the first example here, you as the operator are able to declare a screening period for a month, and it's going to be on the first day of the month. And so what we see is as we collect the Qube data over the month, we're going to have a screening period of the first 7 days, followed by the remainder of the month being non-screening data. So again, the screening period is used for compliance and non-screening period data is used for other voluntary methods. Alternatively, the operator could declare the screening period to start on the 7th day of the month. So this would look like having non-screening data for, or non-screening period data for 7 days, followed by your screening period, and then additional non-screening period day. So this flexibility allows you as the operator to determine the best time in which to do your screen when it's convenient for you, and this will help load level your resources for any potential follow-ups. So diving in a little more on a screening period, how do we know if the screening period has passed or if it has failed? So again, we're looking at the 7-day, the average emission rate during the 7-day screening period, and we're comparing it to the 90% probability of detection threshold. If that 7-day emission rate is below the 90% threshold, that screening period is a pass. And if it's above the 90% probability threshold, it's a fail. So what does this look like? So you can see here we have some data from the Qube system. We have our 7-day emission rate timeline highlighted, and we have our 90% probability of detection threshold as a red dashed line. In this instance, because the screening period average emission rate is below the threshold, this is a pass and no further action is required. Alternatively, looking at some similar data with a different screening period, in this case, the 7-day average emission rate is above the POD threshold. Therefore, this would be a failed screening period, and an OGI follow-up would be required. In all cases, stakeholders will receive a report from Qube with the results of each screening to allow you to then action your follow-up as required. So these slides show what one screening period would look like with operator discretion in here. I'm now going to walk through for each the 5, 10, and 15 kilogram work practices, what that looks like for a particular site on an annual basis. So this first example here is the 90% probability of detection threshold of 5 kilograms an hour. This is some real data from the Qube system, and it's at what's determined to be a major well site or centralized production facility. And the requirement here is that there's 12 screenings per year, 1 per month. Every one of these is a technology-driven screen with Qube. So on the left-hand chart here, what you see is the dark gray line in the background is the emission rate at any given time through the whole year. We can see the red dashed line highlighting our 90% probability of detection threshold of 5 kilograms an hour. And the blue triangles represent each screening period. So there's 12 blue triangles here. What you can see is in the months where the blue triangle is below the red dashed line, that there's a green rectangle here representing that this screening period is passed and no further action is required. With this particular data set, there are 2 screening periods that did fail. They were slightly above the red dashed line, and so these events would require an OGI follow-up. Alternatively, the operator could select a 10 kilogram screening threshold. And in this particular work practice, what's required through the EPA equivalency modeling is 6 screens per year, 1 every other month. So it can be January, March, May, and so on, or it could be February, April, and so on. In this example, we've looked at just the January, March, etc. Follow-ups. And so this is the exact same data set. You can see the red dashed line, and you can see the 6 screening periods all pass. One of the nuances of this particular work practice is that one of these screening periods does have to be completed with a full site OGI inspection. And this can be useful for the operator to kind of clean up all the small little leaks that might be occurring at a site from, threaded fittings, flanges, things like that. And so rather than in the 5 kilogram threshold work practice, you do 12 Qube-driven screens a year. The 10 kilogram would have 5 Qube-driven screens and 1 OGI inspection. Finally, the 15 kilogram threshold is very similar to the 10, except in this threshold or in this work practice, we are completing 12 screens per year. And so again, One of them has to be an OGI inspection, but we complete 12 screens across the year. And in this particular instance, all the screens pass. So rather than do 4 OGI inspections per year, you would be down to 1, which is mandatory, and doing 11 other Qube-driven screens. So how do you get started with Qube for implementing this particular work practice? So the first thing we always recommend for companies is you really want to deploy some continuous monitoring technology with Qube first. What we found is that most sites are good candidates for periodic screening. However, there are some that are not. And although continuous monitoring data with Qube could be useful at sites where the emission rate might be a little higher, that might not make it good for a compliance work practice, we want to avoid applying a compliance-driven work practice at a site that's not a good candidate. So by collecting some data first, we can understand what sites would be most appropriate for the tool. At Qube, we'd recommend deploying the technology to a variety of sites that you have in order to get a kind of an understanding of what your emissions profile might look across your asset base. Alternatively, if you already have some Qubes in the field, we can perform a look-back analysis to understand which of the sites you're currently deployed on would be good candidates for these work practices. The second thing we'd want to do in implementing compliance-driven work practices with Qube is really take a look at any state requirements that might be applicable as well. Every state has a slightly different set of rules. Some states like Colorado and New Mexico have their own technology approval process to comply with their state rules. Other states have an operator-led program to request equivalency for their state level permits, and other states also just would default to the federal program. Qube is knowledgeable in these applications at the state level, and we are pursuing them where they are more technology based, like in Colorado and New Mexico. Other states like Texas is an operator driven thing, and we can help you work towards achieving these equivalency. Following, once these first 2 steps are complete, we would also recommend kind of practicing the workflow for a few months. We can generate kind of mock screening periods at any given time that are not really being used for compliance purposes just yet, but what can help you get comfortable with the work practice and what you can expect. And then once we're fully comfortable, that's when you can move to full implementation. You fully implement a Qube-driven compliance work practice, incorporate Qube into your EPA monitoring plan, engage and train all your stakeholders, and then get into continuous planning and scheduling of the screening periods, along with assisting with reporting. At this point, I'm going to walk through a case study of what this could actually look like for an operator over 2 months. And so this particular site you see on the screen is an example site that would be considered a major well site or centralized production facility. And in this particular example, the operator has selected the Qube 90% probability of detection 5 kilogram work practice. That would be 12 Qube driven screenings per year, 1 per month. And now we're going to get into how the operator defined their periodic screening schedule and what the results are. So in this example, the operator defined their periodic screens for January and February. The first one was planned to be from January 16th to 22nd, and in February from the 18th to the 24th. Again, within the month of the required screen, the operator has discretion to schedule when this screen will occur. So looking at screening period number 1 here, we can see what the, from January 16th to 22nd, what we're showing on the left here is some Qube data showing the 7-day emission rate along with the 5 kilogram threshold. What you can see is that in this particular instance, the 7-day average emission rate is above the threshold. And this operator would receive a report from Qube following the screening period, showing the results of the screen. This is just an example on the right. Some of the site details, the work practice being deployed, the threshold, the screening period dates, and finally what the average emission rate during the screening period was. Because the average emission rate here, 5.5 kilograms, is above the 5 kilogram threshold, this screening period would be determined to not have passed. And the next step for the operator in this instance would be to perform an OGI follow-up to identify the source of the emissions and make the required repairs. So in this case, the operator would be leveraging the Qube inspections module. And what this module does is allow you as the operator to track your response to this particular screening period all the way to closure. So in this case, the operator performed an OGI follow-up on the 28th of January, and they were able to make the repair on the same day. And so you can see here that the operator, some comments, they inspected the fugitive emission components with an OGI camera at this particular site. They found a PSV to be passing, and they were able to complete the repair using an on-site replacement. And so the next step for the operator in this particular instance would be to just move on to their next screening period and see what the results of that is. So screening period 2, again, this was determined by the operator to be from the 18th to the 24th of January, or of February, I should say. And again, we see very similar data here again. We see the threshold for the work practice along with the 7-day emission rate. And the report from Qube in this instance calculated what the average emission rate of the screen was. So in this case, it was 4.4 kilograms versus the 5 kilogram threshold. This results in a pass screen. And so the next step for the operator would be to move on to their next screening period. No trip to the field was required. In this instance, the operator just relied on the technology to perform the screen. So wrapping up, as Gretchen highlighted at the start, Qube has been approved as an alternative test method, I should say, by the EPA for periodic screening work practices. We've been approved under the 5, 10, and 15 kilogram work practices, and this can apply to any site that is currently subject to Quad OB or Quad OA. And assuming that Quad OC comes into effect in the future, it will also apply to those sites as well. Overall, this work practice allows the operator a lot of flexibility to select the right work practice for them. Not every site needs to be at the 5, 10, or 15 kilogram threshold. You can determine what site work practice is right for that facility, and you can plan and schedule your screens around the performance of that facility. Additionally, with Qube, you can control your cost. Other technologies used for leak detection and repair compliance kind of have a cost per inspection. So as the inspection frequency goes up, whether it's an internal cost, having your own crews running an OGI camera, or another service provider providing periodic screens, each one of those has a cost. With Qube, the cost is the same regardless of the number of screening periods required. And so you can kind of control how much your program is going to cost at a very base level. Additionally, being able to pick when your screening period occurs is another benefit of this program. You can own your schedule. You're not on your service provider's schedule. You can determine when the right time to perform your screening is for you. And then finally, there's additional value to having continuous monitoring data outside of the compliance purpose. You can be notified immediately if there is a problem that occurs and help manage your corporate risk and respond to events when they occur. So thank you for your time today. Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you, Ben, for setting this up. If you have any questions for Gretchen or myself, you can feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or via email. And alternatively, you can see the email there, info@qubeiot.com. If you follow up there, we will route you to the right people. Thank you.